or do we just more broadly define, in fact, literally, that's where you walked in, and points of view were being expressed. Now that none of you are at least a bit uncomfortable about sharing your points of view, continue if there's any additional comments on that. Yeah.
Governor, I want to thank you. I know I speak on behalf of everyone. Just says thanks for convening us so quickly and to be able to share thoughts. I think we probably are sharing a lot of concerns that Californians throughout the state would like to share with the top officer for our state. We want to see action, obviously. Fortunately, we come from a state as well that probably does more than most when it comes to trying to prevent these types of violent occurrences. And I think we started out pretty early on by saying to the first responders and to those who don't wear a uniform but were there to comfort the victims, thank you very much. What can you say to folks who are suffering? Other than there's someone there, there's someone who cares. And so I think at this stage, having heard from a number of very expert individuals, we can try to make the best of the situation here in California. But I don't think there's any doubt. California does more than most do to try to address these and to prevent them. And there were some good ideas shared about how we can continue to be forward-leading and at the forefront when it comes to making sure not only do we address violence, but we prevent it from ever occurring.
Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Governor, thank you for pulling together this task force. Obviously, we're all saddened by what's happening in our country and in our communities. I appreciate this task force because you pull together what has to be a multi-pronged approach to how we promote safety in our communities. And that involves law enforcement, that involves schools, that involves health and mental health and other resources. And we are committed to work with the education community in the state, working across our school districts to have a conversation about the role of education in addressing hate and hate speech and hate acts, how we promote tolerance and understanding. But we would also say that we are going to continue to raise the need that we see for expanded resources in schools around mental health, around social emotional learning supports. I appreciate those who've raised the need for more counselors in schools to help those who deal with trauma. We stand by to do our part to make sure that we are doing what we can to push back on hate and to promote tolerance and understanding in our state.
Mark, you're the Director of Office of Emergency Services. We had a conversation an hour or so ago about post 9/11 and how this nation responded to acts of terrorism, and how we had constituted among many states, I imagine every state in the country, constituted a version of this preventing violent extremism task force. That led to a lot of consternation, a lot of stress, particularly the Muslim community. That was expressed and reinforced here today. We are looking to reconstitute that commission and broaden it. Mark, why don't you explain a little bit about what we're now thinking?
Really, it's to really approach this in a much different way. This is a way in which we are leveraging all of the community, from public health, schools, academia, law enforcement, across the sectors, public, private, non-governmental, faith-based, groups who represent our immigrant population, people who are victimized as well as people who can provide solutions, to come with the best minds and be able to address this head on. There has been plenty of research. We know data analytics-wise, some of the profiles of these shooters that we've seen, these activities that we've seen, and we now need to work together to better develop a set of metrics, the ability to buy down the threat, and to build a safer community that's more resilient, but one that also has the ability to feel safe to go to school, safe to go to the festival, to the farmer's market, or whatever the case may be, without unduly putting burdens on law enforcement that they cannot meet an expectation, which actually harms them psychologically and personally just as much as people who are victimized by this. So I think that we have an opportunity, Governor, here to now take this and build on it, and with some great leadership. I know the three of you are providing and our ability to build some metrics in, really look at some timelines and some successes as we move forward in trying to lie down this and really educating the public as well into understanding what is it they're seeing and then having a place to adequately report that so that we can all be as safe as possible.
I know I only asked for an hour of your time. We're at an hour and a half, so I'm very sensitive to that, and I appreciate the old days would be your pagers ringing, but now it'll be your cell phones. So I want to be conscious of that. But there's a number of you that expressed some insightful points of view. I wonder if you wish to repeat them or offer additional thoughts, particularly in relationship to the comments we just had before you all walked in.
Governor David Schreiber again from the California School Employees Association. You know, certainly we're here today because of recent acts of violent hate committed by white supremacists in the last few recent days and over the last week. As school employees, and I know teachers, we're certainly concerned of the rash of school shootings that have happened across the country. In most cases, school shootings are perpetrated by a current or former student. We talked about the need for additional counselors to be there for our students and to be there to be a trusted adult when another student on campus knows that something might happen, which is true in most circumstances with school shootings, that another student on campus knew something about the child having a firearm or intent. But I know the Surgeon General and the Superintendent both have talked a lot about ACEs. And another thing we find among a lot of these school shooters is a lot of instances of adverse childhood experiences. And I just want to say we appreciate your focus on early childhood education. That will increase the amount of early interventions that are happening for students that are having a lot of issues at home or in their community. And I think continuing to focus in that realm will hopefully, in the long run, help address some of these school shootings.
I appreciate that. That's great. I'm going to put you on the spot. UC Davis has been doing for 40 years, you said. I don't think people are fully appreciative of research in this space, some renewed energy, renewed resources in the last few years. But you're about to come out with a number of reports on these issues, and obviously you're in the vanguard. No other state is investing the kind of resources this state and other partners are in this kind of research. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about
Sure,
that.
and thank you, Governor. The state's investment in research is unique in the country. It's larger than federal investment now by far, and no other state is coming close. What it's allowing us to do is gather the very basic information that will underlie a sound public understanding of the causes and consequences of firearm violence. It will help underlie sound evidence-based policy making. It will provide direction for interventions and an opportunity to evaluate those interventions. As you mentioned, I think a number of our basic studies are going to be coming out just in the very next few months. Let me add something. I have been at this since the early 1980s, and paradoxical as it may sound on a day like today, I am more optimistic than I have been at any time in a long time, for two reasons. One is, here in California, over the long haul, the problem is getting better. We have one of the lowest firearm suicide rates in the nation. We have a far below average firearm homicide rate, and both of those have been trending downward, while in the rest of the country, they've been trending upward. Lots of reasons for that. Credit has many parents, and I think there's room for them all to share that credit. But the other reason I'm optimistic is because of the response. For most of those years, there were a very small number of people who work on this problem and nobody paying attention. And those days are over, and I offer this as a good example.
I am prone to want to end on a positive note. And I am sensitive to everyone's time. You've got everybody you need to phone or track down. They're all in one room. To the press, I offer any of us.
Governor,
Wish to ask questions.
I'd like to just
Chief, thank you.
reiterate that from the Police Chiefs Association, there are hundreds and hundreds of cases that law enforcement working with our communities have a lot of successful stories. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that have been successfully intervened, where people got taken to the right mental health professionals to get the help that they needed. And and we stop a critical incident from happening, and we never hear about those. And so I just want to applaud our law enforcement in California because we do a fantastic job at solving a lot of these problems. Unfortunately, we don't get all of them, but we do get many, and many more than we know about, so.
Yeah. No, in the vernacular sport I love most, baseball, unlike baseball, public servants don't get credit for saves. And that's important to remind folks the work you're doing every single day that are not headlines because of that work, and I appreciate that. Let me just, before, you guys all jump in, but Mark, I want to just sort of end, because I want to put a punctuation point on why we're here, as is suggested, the incidents over the last week, and obviously 3 high-profile incidents. Before you walked in, the Attorney General rightly made the point, there are roughly 100 people lose their lives every single day in this country that don't get this kind of attention, and that we are resolved to address as well, and we don't want to diminish that, and it's important. I thought that was a great point to highlight. But the issue of white supremacy, the issue of what is occurring here in the state of California, the issue of domestic terrorism, the issue that has brought so much focus and attention in our national debate and discourse, that's real even here in California.
I would like to offer, as much as part of the issue as a parent, framework that I've been talking to my teenage children about white supremacy, because I think every time I hear that phrase still, it is jarring. And I actually think it's important to say it out loud and name it. But the frame I use isn't a new one. It's actually from an educator, Gavin Newsom, who wrote a brilliant book that talked about the culture of white supremacy like a smog that we all breathe in. Because it is a smog in our culture, our community, our nation still. And it affects people very differently, just like smog. If you have asthma, smog can kill you. If you don't, smog could just be an inconvenience and make your sunsets look a little different. But we're all accountable for creating that smog, just like pollution. We all have something we can do on a daily basis to cut through that smog, and we all collectively have work that we can do to have policies and practices that address it as a community and as a society. And that framework, when I talk to my children about it, cuts through some of the fear, but also addresses that this isn't a one issue. It isn't just about mental health, where people with mental health have victims of violence. It's not just about gun ownership. Second Amendment rights are not absolute. Neither are any of the rights in our Bill of Rights. None of them are absolute. We regulate all of them for the safety and health of our country. And it's not just about hatred writ large. We can name it as something that we all can work towards, every one of us.
I'll stick it. Mark, can you flesh out, because people are curious, are these hate groups, they exist in California? Or are they some other, some kid from Nevada came to California?
Well, and he was also California.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, yes, hate groups do reside in California. Historically, they have been a smog in our state, as in other states. Historically, they have been, I would say, behind the scenes over the course of the last few years. They have risen out and become more prevalent, and we are seeing now more acting out in certain areas, whether it's here on the steps of the Capitol, in having a different opinion from a counter group at a legalized protest, or individuals who have an ideology or believe in ideology that is in alignment with a white supremacist ideology, acting out individually, lone wolf actors that may be inspired by some sort of rhetoric or something that they've seen or heard. And the fact of the matter is, there's groups and there's individuals. And both of these present a challenge for us. Again, 90% of the time, law enforcement is on top of it. But there is that percentage, that delta of time that we do see an active shooter get to a school, or we do see an active shooter or a larger group target a particular immigrant population. And that's where we need to focus on it. We need to stay out in front of it and continue to buy that down. Just like we buy down natural disaster threats in our state, we as a community, working together, need to buy down that threat to this particular population.
So we welcome any questions. Let me just make one point. What was interesting, and it's a theme from me, forgive me, was obliquely referenced, but only obliquely, in our conversation was what doesn't need to be said, in that these shootings overwhelmingly, almost exclusively, are males, boys, men. I put in loose quotes. I do think that is missing in the national conversation. If there was anything more obvious, I don't know what is, why it is that we've just come to accept that. That's been so normalized and sort of baked in that it's not even debated any longer. Why does it have to be? Why is it men dominantly, always? And I think that goes deep to the issue of how we raise our boys to be men. It goes deeply to values that we tend to hold dear: power, dominance, and aggression, over empathy, care, collaboration. That is a deeper conversation, forgive me, a more difficult one to have, but I want to just introduce that into this debate as we move more tactically to address the issue of early childhood trauma, address the issues of stresses that become mental health issues, that become access to weapons and ease to which one accesses them. All of those things I think are important, but I offer gender being another one.
Governor, as it relates to this discussion nationally, what restrictions on ammunition at the national level would you like to see?
I'd like to see them model California's background check on ammunition purchases, and we're going to fight like the Dickens. We've got an outstanding leader to my left, your right, who's going to continue to do what he can if indeed this ends up in the courts. There's an effort to stop our background checks on ammunition purchase. I'll say it, I've said it 100 times, guns don't kill people. Guns require a dangerous component, and that's ammunition. And it's interesting, we are debating background checks on guns, but we're not debating background checks on their dangerous component. Rather curious to me. It's an incomplete part of this debate, not in California, and soon not in New York State. But they are litigating, and like our large capacity magazine clip ban, they are finding they're finding their ways in the courts, but we are confident, right?
And at the state level, would you like to see some form of a buyback program, and if so, what might that look like?
Yeah, look, you're seeing that at the local level. There's some local law enforcement that do this on many, many occasions, where that's appropriate. We've done a lot of that. Makes you feel good. In some cases, does a little good, but I don't think gets to the magnitude of the challenge we have, the gun culture that's so dominant in this country.
Governor, this morning the President made a reference to involuntary confinement in the context of this conversation. I wonder if you and your health officials at the table believe that there is a greater role for involuntary confinement in the area of mental health.
Well, that's a broader conversation. We've talked about that in forums like this in the past. I've been open to those issues, but not in relationship to the President's comments or in relationship to a real response to this, to the trend lines that are now headlines in this country. That's a deeper conversation. I'm happy to express my points of view with greater nuance, but I've leaned into this as a former mayor. I've been certainly watching this as Lieutenant Governor, now Governor, and we are certainly having that conversation with Tom Inzel, our behavioral health advisor, and obviously our secretary's here, and I'm open, but very cognizant that I'm sitting next to the ACLU and recognize the nuance and complexities.
Governor, do you, California has the gun violence restraining order, but it's been underused. In 3 years, there's research that it's been used like 400 times. And people say part of the issue is that law enforcement agencies don't know about it, don't know how to use it. There's not enough training. Do you think that that's something the state needs to do? Do you need to step up the investments you make and making sure people know that this exists?
Looks like it. And as you know, we're adding to that debate. There's a bill pending in the legislature, and that you'll hear a lot more about, I'm sure, this time next week, that likely will make it down to my desk to expand its scope. We were having that conversation an hour or so ago, and it's another one of those areas that has its advocates and its detractors. But as it relates to program passing, it's not problem solving, and that's fundamental to your question. You just said we passed a law, we haven't solved the problem because many people are not familiar with it. So the answer is certainly in the affirmative, that we have to do a better job with that law to communicate its purpose and its potential potency. As you know, it's been exported to many states across this country. I think that's a healthy thing. Interestingly, even Lindsey Graham seemed to find it in his heart to suggest that he wants to see it expanded. But again, it's not good enough if it's not being utilized, and certainly part of our work group here, Safer Communities as opposed to Violent Extremism, will allow for more interagency collaboration, cooperation. Our post enhancements and training, the CalBIT enhancements and training dollars that we put in the budget all could help with raising awareness around it.
Governor, as you noted that there's actually multiple bills to expand the gun violence restraining order that are moving towards your desk. There are more than a dozen gun-related bills that are still moving in the legislature, some that would limit, to one gun purchase a month per person, ban certain kinds of components that are used to build guns. Are you prepared at this point to throw your support behind any of these policies?
You guys have long known my bias in this space, and none of it's a secret. And they're well in excess of a dozen, more than 2 dozen. Last count was even greater number than that. And so I'm monitoring all of them. Coincidentally, last week, Anthony Williams, my ledge director, we had a comprehensive, detailed conversation in this space, even before Gilroy, tragically. I won't opine on any of the specific bills at this stage, not something I typically will do, but in broad strokes, you can imagine I'm broadly supportive of those efforts.
On the issue of white supremacy and hate groups, in your budget this year, you set aside $15 million for improving security at susceptible institutions. One-time funding that was following the synagogue shooting in San Diego. And I think it was something like $700,000 or $800,000 for addressing gaps in data collection. Do you think more needs to be done, more resources set aside to address hate groups, white supremacy?
The answer is likely, but I'm very proud. I think we went from 200,000, where's Anna? She left. 200,000 the previous year to 15 million this year. There's increases in budgets, and then there's that. So that's suggestive of a desire to get serious about hardening. We also provided those dollars with more flexibility than they've been provided in the past, so people can determine what's more appropriate for their unique circumstances, from bollards to actual personnel, and not just physical barriers as it relates to protection. But issues of data collection and like, that was a deep part of the conversation. There's no question in that space that we have a lot of work to do to get to where we need to be.
And so, I mean, on the security question, that's, I don't want to say, it's somewhat reactive, right? It's that, God forbid, if something does happen, there's sufficient security somewhere. But do you think more investment needs to happen up front to ensure that these groups are, wiped out, or they're minimized? And if so, what does that look like? Just data collection, or? Well,
it's deeper than a look. I mean, I'm not one, just the answer to every question can't be, armed guard. And I say that not because I'm opposed to armed guards. It's just, I think it was Bobby Kennedy said, armed camps are not places of peace. The reason I have the Surgeon General here is, it's interesting, I read one comprehensive study looking at mass shootings from 1966 to today. The one thing that universally all of these mass shootings had in common is the mass shooters had early childhood trauma. It was interesting, it was almost the exception. All the others had unique attributes and characteristics, save the early childhood related issues. It's not lost on me the power of this movement to focus on these screenings. As you know, in this year's budget, we committed a $120 million 3-year appropriation in this space. 40.8 million, I think you received just this year, for investments in this space. You gotta begin at the beginning, and then we can enter into the education system. You talked, and I'm grateful for the preschool investments and recognition, school resource office, wellness centers to deal with physical and adolescent mental health, all in a process to build up in a safer community, more resilient community, and then appropriate law enforcement as needed.
Governor, a North Bay lawmaker today revived a bill that had been shelved to create an excise tax on firearm and ammo sales, and he cited the shootings of this past weekend as a direct reason why he's kind of throwing a Hail Mary. Is that out of the question this year?
I'll take a look. I don't know that it is. I don't know.
Have you had a conversation with Governor Siciliak about the sale to?
Yeah, we
To Mr. Becerra,
sorry.
was that a legal sale? I mean, well, the question is to you, Governor. But then-
Yeah, we paid phone tag and text tag, and have leaned in those conversations that were never formal in this space. I'll leave it at that without getting ahead of myself in terms of what his commitments will allow him to exercise that or express that. But you were asking the attorney about.
Was that a legal sale in Nevada?
Beyond what we know about the weapon, you're talking about the individual in the Gilroy case?
Yes.
That weapon would not have been legal to sell in California, nor would it have been legal to import that weapon into California.
But was it legal to sell it in Nevada to this guy?
We don't control Nevada law, and so whether Nevada had laws that prohibit it or not, that's not our jurisdiction.
But from everything we've been told, it appears so. Yeah. And that's a dangerous thing for a governor to say, because then you'll find out something different. But it appears so, based on at least the information we've got.
Based on that, Governor, you've been vocal yourself right after the Gilroy shooting that how do you control, we have some of the strongest gun laws in California, but when your neighbor has far weaker gun laws, how do you control?
Time for Mitch McConnell to do his job. Time for Mitch McConnell to be held to account. The legislature, and at least Congress, the House of Representatives, passed a bill, I think, in February. My recollection is 240 people supported that, including 8 Republicans, to expand background checks, close loopholes, in its pending action. Simple, vote. You don't like it, Mr. McConnell, you have the right of that. Why don't you put up the vote? Put it on the Senate floor. He doesn't have the guts to do it. He's weak. He's a weak leader. I'll be careful. And my mother told me if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything. I just ended my comment.
What about, as the governor of California, though, how do you have more
Put it on
discussion
the
with
floor.
Nevada?
Put it on the floor. We need federal laws. Now, look, in the absence of federal laws, you have patchworks of laws. Are they ideal? No, but they're necessary. And I'm proud. Look, I was mayor of San Francisco, sitting there at the Cow Palace calling for large capacity magazine bans because I was frustrated with the state of California. We were doing storage requirements because I was frustrated with the state. State moved mountains and done extraordinary things. Now I'm frustrated about the federal government. In the absence of federal leadership, that's where this belongs. But in the absence, we'll continue to lead. And that's why we'll take a look at all of these gun laws that are proposed and pending. A lot of them will end up on my desk, and I look forward to seeing them. And we'll continue to advocate and call out those in positions of power and influence that are abdicating their leadership and are cowards.
Governor,
Mitch McConnell is a coward. He's abdicated leadership. Do your job, put it up for a vote.
Governor, just for you personally, you had a family member you lost to guns, and thinking about your kids now having to grow up in this era, what does this issue mean to you personally, and have you had any conversations with your kids, and what do those look like?
You don't have a 7-year-old son unless you have a conversation about guns, God forbid anyone have a son at that age who's sensitive on all these things. But look, let me just put it in a different perspective when it broadens it. The second utterance when we started this meeting was to Tony Thurman, saying, school's about to start. Tony, I've got 4 kids, you've got kids. What the hell do I say to my kids? What do you say to your kids and the 6 million children that are going to go back to school in the next few weeks, and all of their teachers that also clearly are anxious about this moment. So, you know, it's a workplace, it's the schools, now it's public places. We got work to do. And that's why we're here, that's why we're convening this meeting. We're leading, but we can do more and do better, and good enough never is in this space.
Last question,
Governor,
please.
you talked about Mitch McConnell, and not trying to be inflammatory at all, but
I already was.
what responsibility do you think President Trump has for this latest round of shootings, particularly the one in El Paso?
I'll focus on, what more can I say about the president? But Mitch McConnell, put it up for a vote.
All right, that's going to wrap, Governor, unless you have any last words.
No. And you know what, except this, deep gratitude for every single person that's in this room. They all came on short notice. They didn't have to be here. There were 4 legislative leaders that were on the phone as well. I compliment them. I'm grateful to all of you, leadership, and we need you. And this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. Thank you again for being here, and look forward to many more of these over the next few months and years. Thank you, guys.